2013, the Hong Kong government has planned to build a new desalination plant on the Junk Bay. The project, which costs more than $115 million, is expected to complete it in 2022. The plant would provide 10% of Hong Kong's drinking water.
The 10-hectare area will be used to build a new desalination plant, which is expected to produce 135,000 square meters of water every day. However, why doesn't Hong Kong build new reservoirs instead of resorting to the seawater desalination route?
水库，我们要考虑有没有会不会新开的水库。
We thought about building new reservoirs, but it is not to our best economy interest compared to other options. Therefore, we're leaning more toward the seawater desalination route. As you know, the land in Hong Kong is very expensive and limited.
From social media, we can see that the advocacy groups for the building of desalination plants are calling for Hong Kong's independence on water. It is because in the past 20 years, the Hong Kong population has increased by 1 million, and the cost of buying Dongjiang water has also been increasing year by year. Therefore, the scholars are also asking the government to search for new water sources.
现在政府的估计，它的成本是每个立方米12。
The government estimates that the cost of seawater desalination is $1.7 per cubic meter. It is not that much more expensive. We can afford the difference in costs. On the other hand, even though it is a bit more expensive, we're also buying an insurance plan at the same time.
我们的水管理策略来讲是需要有一个全面的。
In terms of our water management strategy, we need to have a buffer. Imagine that it is quite dry this year and Dongjiang water is not even enough to meet the needs of the Guangdong province itself. It would be a serious problem. Hong Kong needs a backup plan, so seawater desalination is definitely necessary. We can't put all of our eggs in one basket. We need to lessen the risks.
As early as when Hong Kong was a British colony, the government had thought about decreasing the risks. In this old picture, we can see that Hong Kong once had the largest seawater desalination plant in the world. Back then, it produced more than 180,000 square meters of fresh water every day.
This is the site of the former Le Anpai desalting plant in Hong Kong. It was built back in the 1970s when the Cultural Revolution took place in China. At the time, the Hong Kong government was afraid that it would affect the provision of Dongjiang water. Therefore, it looked for new water sources and eventually built the seawater desalination plant, which was opened in 1975. Back then, it was the largest desalination plant in the world. Later, after the Chinese economic reform took place, China and Hong Kong's relationship became friendlier. Therefore, there was no problem with the provision of Dongjiang water once again. As a result, in 1980, this desalination plant was closed down. It eventually became a flea market and a location for shooting movie scenes.
Besides political reasons, the other reason that the desalination plant was deserted was because it used distillation technology. At that time, it relied on burning fossil fuel to heat up the ocean water. Therefore, the cost was quite high. Then in the 1980s, the price of fossil fuel rose, and as a result, Long On Pai desalting plant had to be shut down due to financial considerations. More than 30 years later, Hong Kong is restarting to desalinize the seawater. However, the cost is still a big concern. The government has decided to follow other desalination plants around the world and use reverse osmosis technology to both reduce the salt in the seawater and lower the overall cost.
两大水库当时在世界是技术领先的两大水库，万宜水库跟船湾。
The two reservoirs, the Highland Reservoir and the Plover Cove Reservoir, are quite advanced in the world. Besides, back then, Hong Kong had the world's largest desalination plant. When the three projects were completed, Hong Kong had the ability to survive solely on the local water provisions.
Scholars are optimistic about the future of seawater desalination. This way, Hong Kong can be independent on its own water provisions. Hong Kong can learn from the experience in Singapore. KK Lee of the CUHK mentioned that in the past, Singapore had to buy fresh water from Malaysia. However, in recent years, Singapore turned to seawater desalination and production of reclaimed water, making it independent in their own water provisions.
到现在为止，它还在向马来西亚去买淡水。
Currently, Singapore still buys fresh water from Malaysia. The main reason that Singapore still does this is because the cost of buying such water is lower than producing water locally. Now that Singapore has the ability to produce water for their own use, their water provisions is quite safe. So, since they have a backup plan in store, then it's no problem for Singapore to buy water from Malaysia. This way, it can buy water at a lower cost.
After all, Hong Kong's situation is quite different from Singapore. The scholars have suggested that Hong Kong's ideal water provision model is 40% Dongjiang water, 30% reservoirs, and 30% desalination plant. If such ideal is feasible, then Hong Kong might need more than one desalination plant in order to be completely independent in their water provisions.